The Team House with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
So, Gene, you did make it through selection on the second try. You were potential Special Forces material there, make it into the Q course. And there's one story I'm not going to let you out of this without telling. And so folks out there listening to this, I first heard about Gene, not by name, but I heard about him because he was a few courses ahead of me. And they were lecturing us in SERE school not to be like this certain student. Don't do what he did. And that turned out to be Gene. I didn't find out it was him until I was reading his book many years later. But Gene, could you tell us the infamous SERE school story from the horse's mouth, from the man himself, the legend around Camp McCall?
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. So I guess like the first, okay, look, it's winter, when you're on the evasion course, nobody is really living off the land that well, right? Like everything is picked, whatever you could remember from the PowerPoint classes about what you can eat in the woods. It's like day 7 or 8 or something. And if you recall, there's dog teams tracking you and you're running through the woods. We found a place to rest and we wanted to build a fire, right? And so I grabbed two guys and we went out to go look for firewood. When we were wandering out, we started hearing like Latin music, right? And realized, oh, there's some people here. And it's the middle of nowhere, right? It's Western North Carolina, and my thought process was like, we should go towards that music because there might be just some random people who are squatting on the Fort Bragg military reservation and they might have food, right? They're not supposed to be there. Maybe we can kind of, if they're not going to be friendly, maybe we can coerce them.
Blackmail them. Food. You can say it. You can blackmail them.
So we emerge out of these woods, like emaciated, wearing our food, our uniform, our BDUs, and your knife, right? And these guys, there's like a whole bunch of Latino dudes playing soccer, right? And there's an RV there. There's little music, et cetera, and train tracks. And I do remember that we signed some stuff before we started the course. Don't cross the train tracks. I do remember. I very much. There's no point that I ever claimed that I didn't know you're supposed to cross the train tracks. And I just mention it because it's like I remember looking at the train tracks and then looking at the dudes across the train tracks and being like, well, it's only 50 meters from the train tracks. You know what I mean? Like maybe like at first, actually, if I recall correctly, we actually went up and stood on the train tracks and tried to talk to them at the edge of the train tracks initially to try to play within the rules. And they're like, what are you doing? If you want to talk to us, just come over here. Anyway, we rolled over there. I speak a little bit of Spanish from spending time overseas in Ecuador when I was in high school. I did this like public health volunteer project, just enough to say like a lot of vocabulary and communicate, right? And okay, so I'll try to keep this short. So basically, we built a bit of rapport, right? Speaking Spanish. One of the other guys with me was actually a fluent Spanish speaker, so both of us were kind of doing our thing, talking to different people. And eventually I was like, okay, look, let's cut the shit. We're extremely hungry. We've been trying to survive for like 8 days. Do you guys have any food, here at all? And it's like, look, we're really sorry. We just had a party, but we can take you to the local tienda down the store, right? The local store down the road, sorry. And so we're like, okay, sounds pretty close by. And they're like, oh, in fact, we'll drive you, right? And we're like, oh, wow, that's really nice. So we pull up the pickup truck and the 3 of us jump in. And he starts rolling out, but he gets on the hardball and starts rolling out at like 60 miles per hour, right? I thought it was like around the corner, the way he said, maybe because my Spanish is not good, whatever. So just think about this, right? Like we're like, oh shit, and I'm looking at the 2 dudes with us and they're just like, I don't know. And I'm like, I don't know too. I mean, like, and I remember at the time having this thought, like, this is a major watershed moment in your life. What would you choose to do?
Right.
And I wasn't sure which way was going to be. Like it was like a spirit was talking to me. Like, this is a big moment, Gene. What are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to see where this road takes us. This is just so interesting. And so we roll in, and where we end up is Aberdeen. Which is a major town in Western North Carolina. It's far.
Yeah,
it's like
because the evasion course is out in Carthage.
That's right. Aberdeen is far, man. It's like 60 miles. Yeah. So it's a long drive. Like, I think we actually fell asleep on the way over there. Anyway, so we get there and I'm in survival mode. So I'm thinking like, we need like gruel. I just want like bread and like meat and maybe like cheese. So let's roll into this like gas station. Okay. And let me go let's go in there and see what we can do. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know, we're in survival school, right? So I'm like trying to kind of like, role play and thinking like, I'm even thinking like, maybe we should just steal a bunch of food, right? Like, and just, just be guerrilla, whatever. If you recall, when they strip search you before the evasion course, all you have is your ID card and then the knife, right? And so I had memorized my credit card number because at the time, I was ordering a lot of stuff online and you have to manually enter it in the early 2000s every single time. And so at one point, I just realized that I memorized maybe like 12 of the numbers. And I was tired of getting up every time to go find my wallet. So I was just like, I just sat down for like 5-10 minutes, wherever, and then just memorized it. And then it reinforced it every time I was entering my credit card number. So that's why I had a memorized credit card number. I was accused later on that I'd like plotted this whole thing. Like, it's a huge deal to memorize your credit card. Guys, it's not that hard. It's 16 numbers, right? Like, and a date and then 3 numbers. It's not that crazy. And so I had also, so in this gas station, I roll up with my ID card and the young high school, aged female attendant is like, okay, who's this dirty Asian dude in BDUs coming up and showing me this ID card and asking me to buy bread and ham, using a memorized credit card. She just basically was like, can you please leave and call the cops, right? So we leave the gas station and I tell the driver, I'm like, hey man, okay, that didn't work, but I know is there a Papa John's pizza in this town? Because I know where I live in Fayetteville, I call Papa John's Pizza all the time and I just give my credit card number over the phone and they're good to go. So logic would tell me that if I just tell you face to face, I know it's weird that I'm face to face telling you, but technically you should sort of process it. So he says yes. And so we drive down to a small Papa John's in Aberdeen. I walk in, I ask for the manager, negotiate. She thinks it's weird, but says, you know what? You're right. There's no difference between calling on the phone and doing it in person. Fine.
And they want to support the troops.
Yeah, that too, right? And so at this point, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, now it's gloves off, right? Like credit card number. Like, I'm taking care of all the boys. I bought like 10 large pizzas, all these buffalo wings, all this like, drinks, right? Because it's just like, well, it's unlimited, right? It's unlimited. And so I bought like something like $300 worth of pizza or whatever. And so I actually also even added charge and tip the drivers. I give them like $40 in cash or something. So we roll back now to the training area, and now we've been gone for a long time, right? And if you remember, like, this is a little bit like we just went off to go get wood, and our team is probably thinking we got eaten by a bear or something like that. When we come back in with these 10 pizzas, everything like that, I always tell this in this way. I've never seen grown men jump in the air for joy before. Right. Until that, there's actually a question on the SF psychological exams, all the little bubble ones. I remember they ask you, have you ever physically jumped in the air for joy before? And I remember being like, hell no, who the hell does that? and when we came back, all of the team members were jumping in the air, celebrating, whatever. Like, it's just the greatest thing ever, right? So we ate and inhaled all the food. I'm not even kidding, like probably 5 minutes, right? It was the best pizza I've ever tasted in my entire, maybe best food I've ever tasted in my entire life. Inhaled that shit and then threw all the trash into the fire to burn all the evidence, right? The next day we got picked up to go to the RTL, right? And so if you guys recall, there's a part of it where they strip search you naked and hose you down, blah, blah, blah stuff. So for whatever reason, I forgot to get rid of the receipt, right? And I had weirdly, which nobody ever does, right, in that BDU uniform, I took the receipt and put it in my left upper breast pocket, which nobody uses. I remember, right? Nobody uses the BDU pockets, right? It's just not used. It's like this weird fashion statement on the BDU that nobody uses, right? And so I put it in there for whatever reason and forgot about it. And when they found that receipt, they're like, this is weird. This is $300 pizza yesterday in Aberdeen. Right? This doesn't make any sense, right? they let me go through the RTL for probably like almost a good half of it, right? Like I'd seen a lot at the RTL.
At the POW camp.
Yeah, the POW camp, where you get, beaten and whatever. You're practicing POW resistance techniques. And so when they pulled me out, they pulled me in a room, and I thought I was getting like some extra hard interrogation or something like that. And the SERE commander, the officer in charge, suddenly appeared. It's like, do you know who I am? Do you remember who I am? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes. And then he throws the receipt on the table, and I see it, and I'm like, okay. My rule is, and I did this at West Point the whole time as well, I will break almost all the rules in pretty egregious ways. But if you ever catch me, okay, I will immediately tell you everything.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't lie about it. It's kind of like a weird thieves code that I have. Obviously, it's not technically, full integrity to break the rules that you agree to adhere to, but I like breaking rules. But if you catch me, I will never lie about it.
Right.
And so they threw the receipt, and immediately I'm like, yep, you got me. This is exactly what happened. And the officer, as you would imagine, officers, they were like just getting angry and angrier as I'm telling the story. Whereas like the first sergeant and the NCOs are like high-fiving each other, laughing. Just, I can't get it. Like, it's just such a different scene, in the room while people are just reeling from me just unloading the whole reality. Because what I found out later is they were so confused. They didn't know what to do, right? Because they found this, they're like, this can't be real, but it is real. And then also, this was during the surge, right? This is 2000. Well, Jack, I think you're pretty close to me in the Q course dates, right? So if you remember, they're trying to push as many SF guys as possible. We didn't get more SF guys because the funnel is the funnel, but they were trying, there's a lot of political pressure trying to get more SF. This is like John Kerry ran for president, and one of the things was on his campaign was, I'm going to double special operations, right? If you remember this time period. And so there's a lot of pressure on the officers to graduate, right? Because I'm literally, that SERE school at that time, I don't know what it's like now, but at that time, that was the last phase of the whole qualification course.
Right. So you've been in training now for well over a year. 2 years.
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years. Right. Plus the language training, all that type of stuff, right? And so, or maybe actually more 18 months, right? Because I skipped the language training. But it's a long time, right? And you've gone through a lot of gates, right? A lot of people have fallen by the wayside. And now I'm like one of the very few officers, right, that is about to graduate. And they're like, do we bring this up or do we just let this gate? And it's interesting because later on, I befriended a lot of these people and got the whole story from their side. And apparently they went through like vigorous debate for like 2 days. Like, what do we do here, right? And ultimately what they decided to do was like, you know what? Let's just ask Gene what the hell, right? And just put the receipt. And they were shocked that I was just like, oh, this is what happened. Right? They were surprised that I was so open about it. And then they were shocked at that point too of what to do.
Right.
And so in a follow-on meeting with the commander of SERE school, he asked me, he's like, hey man, like officer, what would you do? And I gave him the straight up answer, like, you must give me a never to return, right? Like you must make an example of me. That's the standard stock answer, right? It's like, you must give me a return, but you should allow all the NCOs that are on my team to come back to SERE, because initially they kicked out everybody in the whole team, right? And so that's exactly what they did. They gave me a never to return, and then all the answers had to recycle into they got into the very next SERE class, right? And so how did I get back in, right? And all of that, right? So when I was in Korea, I had a short, unique time period where I kind of finagled my way as an armor lieutenant to more, like in civilian terms, the best way to describe it.